Shabbat Shalom. Today we start all over with the Torah scroll. In our congregation the scroll was at its end. We are have scrolled it back and started from the beginning. And we're going to look at the first chapters of the book of Genesis, Beresheet in Hebrew, to look at important points that mark your beginning, my beginning, and our destination. And we're going to see how we look at texts and what the translation means. If you are fluent in Hebrew, it's different than when you are depending on a translation in your language, and that means that the translator has an important role, that because he has made his choice or her choice, and that's what you're ending up with, and we'll see that that can cause some interesting challenges. First, we start with the text as projected already in the introduction on the announcement, which is that we are going to read from Genesis 2 verse 21 through 25, and you'll see that there are already some challenges where I crossed out some words because there's too much tension with what the literal text is saying. Let's go. The Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, but we'll see if that is the man. There was no line crossed to cross out this word, but we'll see if this is only one man. And while he slept, God took one of his ribs, crossed out, and closed up its place with flesh. We're going to look at the literal text in a minute, and because literal is very important, and literal I'll also tell you what that means. But let's continue the text now. The rib, crossed out, which the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman, with a cross out. He brought her to the man. Then the man said, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman," or Eve, "because she was taken out of man." Therefore, a man leaves his father and his mother and cleaves to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Whatever that means, we'll come to that in a minute. Of every pair, both the man and his wife were naked and were not ashamed. Already a new translation is glimmering in this verse 25. So the Torah has been scrolled back, and very consciously we experience that the final words of the Torah scroll of the 5 books of Moses were linked with the first by reading the last words in one service in the last biblical feast, and then also the first words of the beginning of the Bible again. By the way, do you know what the final letter is of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses? You find it in chapter 34, verse 12. It is the letter that belongs to the text where that is about the deeds of Moshe, which he performed in front of Israel, for the eyes of Israel. The last word is Israel, so the last final letter of the Torah is the letter L. Easy. The first letter of the Torah, then, when you scroll back and start from the beginning, the first letter in the Hebrew I'm talking about is the letter B, because it starts with the word in Hebrew, Beresheet, which is Genesis or in the beginning, but it doesn't mean in the beginning, it means something else, or at least much more probably, it means something else. We'll come to that in a minute. Connect those 2 letters, L and B, and you get the word lev, which means heart. And that word is the word that's very important in the Bible, because with your heart you love God. With your heart you read Torah. With that heart you need to do the commandments. Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus in Dutch or in English language, is saying in Matthew 22 verse 40. Read it in your different time after the study. Matthew 22 verse 40 says that with your heart, with love, all the commandments are hinging on that attitude. That's only the beginning of our study. We're going to look at these things, and we are going to see that it is important to read the Bible literally. What does that mean, literally? I'll give you that answer, but what I also want to say as introduction is that literally stands over against traditionally. We always said it, we always did it this way, so don't change that. I don't know if that is the good thing, because it might be that some mistake, or at least only one translation slipped into our view and never something else. Why is it important to do things in the literal way? Because this is the Bible, very important. We need to see what God wants to communicate to us. Why is that important? Because it will help us in our relationship with God, understand Him better, allow Him to reach us more personal, more effectively. It's His text in the original, and the translators had a difficult job to translate that. So let's go to the first 5 verses of Genesis. First, in the more traditional way, where it says this: in the beginning, God. That's a nice statement. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And then God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. Interesting statement, that light needs to be separated from darkness, because light is the opposite of darkness, you would say, yet it needed to be separated, obviously. 5, God called the day, the light, He called day, the darkness, He called night. And there was evening and there was morning, one day. Or in some translations, the first day, which is wrong, because it was not the first day in the literal wording in the Hebrew. It says Yom Echad, which is one day, literally. Now we look at these 5 verses in another but literal translation. So it's not an idea, it's not an interpretation, it's not this is what they mean. No, this is literal translation. Genesis 1. Verses 1 through 5, literal translated. Not in the beginning, but with the first fruit. It says first fruits, but it should be first fruit. So that S is there, but it shouldn't be there. I'm sorry. So sorry for that. With the first fruit, meaning with Messiah. God, and you find that in the New Testament more often, that Paul talks about it with Him, meaning Yeshua, Jesus, with Him and through Him all things have been created. So with the first fruit, this is the literal translation of Genesis, mind you, God created the heavens and the land of Israel. You might think, oh, this is very chauvinistic and very patriotic. But I'm telling you that in the Hebrew it says, Beresheet, bara, in the beginning, He created, Elohim, God, and then after that comes what He created, at Hashemayim, the heavens, and also at Haaretz, at Hashemayim, at Haaretz, the heavens, and the earth, we translate. But Haaretz literally means also the land of Israel. There is a newspaper that's called Haaretz, and that means the land, our land of Israel. So, with the first fruit, the one risen from the dead as the first of all mankind, God created the heavens and the earth, or the heavens and the land of Israel. Now that is a different situation, because that has implications for what the Bible is saying. Perhaps the Bible is not claiming that it is talking about the whole creation, but only the land of Israel. We're depending on what God wanted to say here. The land was desolate and empty, but tohu vavohu, which is the expression for this piece of text, the land was tohu vavohu, means also something like new and yet not yet formed. So there is also something, an opportunity for different views, because there are old ideas that there has been creations before the last one, where God started things and things went south, and so God had to start all over. Anyway, we continue. Darkness was present in the abyss, but the Spirit of Adonai hovered over the water. Adonai said, "Let there be light," and light was there. God saw that light was well prepared. Let there be light, and then light was there, meaning Messiah, who says about himself, "I am the light of the world." Light was there, not created, just called. Let there be light. Light was there. God saw that light was vahitov. It was good, well prepared. The Eternal made separation between light, on the one hand, the light, and darkness, on the other hand. We'll look at this word darkness later on. Adonai linked the light to day. He linked darkness to night. Evening and morning had passed. That together is one day. So we're talking about literal translation. What does that mean? I promise you I would say something about that coming right now. When Yeshua in the New Testament says that he is the door, everybody says, yeah, he doesn't mean that literally. Well, we need to take it literally. But what does literally mean in a saying like that? The answer is, look at how the speaker or a prophet or an author in the New Testament means what he's writing down or saying. When Yeshua says that he's the door, he means it literally. But literal meaning of I'm the door means that he is a passageway to the heavens, to the kingdom of God. You need to go through him. In the book of Hebrews, it talks about this, that you go through him, and you come into the temple through him, through the curtain that is his flesh, it says there. So he's the door. That is a literal statement, but not to be taken that he is a door with hinges and stuff like that. So the answer is, when you define the word taking something literally, look at how the speaker means what he's writing down, what he's saying. Why doing it like that? Why is this so important? You give honor to God as the author of these words. Don't say, I think I want it to be this. I want it to mean this or that. Or our tradition says that it means this or that. Nice, but let the text speak. Give you one example quickly. You need to look it up if you want, if you're not familiar with what I'm saying now. But Peter in the New Testament in Acts chapter 10 has a dream, a vision. And he, in this higher state of consciousness, he is looking at a table sheet coming down with meat of animals, or animals still living, and he needs to kill them and eat. And they're clean, but also ritually unclean. Now there are people who say that this piece of text in Acts chapter 10 means that the dietary laws have been ended. As you can see, that God said, now you can eat everything. And that's always what we said, and our pastor also said it, so that's what it is. Don't do that. I'm not saying don't follow the pastor, I'm just saying follow the literal meaning of the text. Let Peter speak, let him explain, because he does that in the same chapter 10. He explains later on in the verses 24 and later. He means what he learned from this vision. And it's not that the dietary laws ended with that. Look at the meaning. Look at the meaning of the text. Look at meanings that one word can have. If you look it up in a dictionary, you might say, well, if I do that, if I have to do all that, away goes my feeling of spirituality and stuff like that. And you're right, that might happen. I'm not saying that you then should stop searching. I'm only saying that you need to separate academic studies on the one hand and your spirituality on the other hand. Those are two different pathways that lead you to God, and you need both. So let it both take place. Don't mingle the two, and realize that the study is also an important thing, and then you do what we're doing right now. And it might be that you come to new insights. Realize also that 2,000 years of Christianity has filled in some texts and meanings and left out certain things. Not to be negative, but just to state what history has done, and has said things, and have people in the Bible say certain things where people like Abraham and Moses and King David and the prophets knew nothing about. So we need to see that the literal text also comes into the context of location and the context of its history. There are websites that state that the earth is flat. Their evidence is not real evidence. It doesn't mean a thing. And there is enough anti-statements to prove that they're wrong. But sometimes these people have a feeling of fake news and theories that are just saying things because they have a resistance and not any kind of respect for science and for the facts. And so I just warn against these kind of websites that are there. Conspiracy theory is nice perhaps, but it doesn't help you much. So the Bible is the book that is given to us, and the literal meaning, the original meaning, is what is really important, because that is what God is saying, not what the translators think that it is. Another thing is that the Bible doesn't state how old the earth or the universe is. There's no evidence whatsoever that state the age of our planet or of the universe. Who thinks that the earth is only 6,000 years old is repeating old Jewish Middle Age Kabbalists and other people who think that because of certain ideas that have nothing to do with the Bible, but by certain way of interpreting, that this is the situation. You're not anti-God, you're not a disbeliever when you say that 6,000 is not a fact at all. The Bible doesn't say it. You cannot find it in the Bible. It's even difficult to find a certain name in the Bible and to link it with history. History doesn't lie. The Bible doesn't lie. The only difficulty is to link certain people, and it's not always so easy. Who was the Pharaoh in the time of Moses? There's different contradictory interpretations and statements about this. Some people think they honor God by saying that the age of the universe is only short, is only 6,000 years. Now we honor God. Well, if you want to honor God, be my guest, really, you have my blessing. But it's the question if you do that by saying that the earth is only 6,000 years. But it's nice and concise, and it also shows how important mankind, humankind is. I'm saying that God could be even more impressive if the age of the universe is billions of years. Simply because if that is the situation, and the Bible doesn't is not for or against this, then it might be that God is even more powerful and older than you might think, to say it in this strange way. But humankind could be a little bit less important. Some people don't like that. It's an old church thing. I'm sorry to say this. I'll give you an example. The people that are irritated by the fact that it could be more than 6,000. Well, okay, 7. 8. Final. And then you become a very small wheel in a big machinery. This is why in the Middle Ages the church killed people, because they stated that the earth was older, or the universe was older, or the earth was not the center of our system of planets and the sun. It was not the sun that was in the middle and our planet around it. No, it was the planet Earth, and the sun went around it. And so there was this astronomer, Copernicus, who was judged by the church. He was careful with the church. He had seen and had proven that the sun is the center point of our solar system, and that planets went around it as the moon goes around our Earth. The church hated that because now they were not right and they were proven wrong, and so they killed people like him. But he was careful, and he needed to openly state that it was the earth that stood still and the sun went around it. And when he had finished this forced statement, he went down to be seated again, and while he walked away, he whispered, this is documented, he whispered, and yet the church is the one that is, not the church, I'm sorry, the earth is the one that is going around the sun. A little bit less lucky was Giordano Bruno, and he was killed because he was more open in these things. He was a free thinker, he was an Italian priest, he was a cosmologist, he was a philosopher and a free thinker, and that means that he honored truth and honest evidence more than church policies. And this is the difference between fact and fake. Let's go to this darkness thing that I talked about already in the beginning. Darkness stands over against light. Sometimes it's not so. And it's interesting, I'll show you texts where you have to really be careful and have spiritual discretion in order to understand, and discernment in order to see what's going on. One example. In 1 Samuel chapter 2 verse 9, it states the following. You see it on the screen. God will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. Negative. For not by might shall a man prevail. Now that same word, choshech in Hebrew, darkness, you find in Deuteronomy, the 5th of the 5 books of Moses, chapter 5, verse 23. We'll read it now. When you, says Moses to his people, when you heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, while the mountain was burning with fire, you came near to me, all the heads of your tribes and your elders. Now the word darkness is the habitation, temporarily at least, of God, where the voice of God came from. So that word darkness is an interesting word that can have different meanings. Is darkness mentioned in the beginning of the creation, in the first words of the book of Genesis, meant negatively or positively? We don't know, and it's an interesting question. You might think it's a dull question, but you need to realize that we're trying to find God's meaning in his word. Concerning and regarding Messiah Yeshua, it says that he will come during darkness, as a thief in the night. So darkness is an interesting word in the Bible. It's not always negative, but it can be meant darkness. And so we need to really, really be careful and not just say what we might have said before, that it's one thing, it's only bad and negative. So what is it that the Eternal One wants that we read in Genesis? Does he want us to know how old the earth is? Is 7 days of creation important? And 6,000 years, that's it? And 7 days of the whole world, or only of the land of Israel? If we don't know, I'm not trying to sow confusion in your heart. I'm just saying that this is the Word of God, and it might mean certain things that we have never thought before, and be surprised, and allow yourself to be surprised. The beginning of our Bible is meant to let certain things be known. First, number one, God is the beginning of creation. In the beginning, God. He is creator. He is the Aleph and the Tav, or in the New Testament, the Alpha and the Omega. That's the first thing. God is the beginning. Number 2, God, together with Messiah, Beresheet in the Hebrew, in the beginning, or better translated, with the first fruit, together, yet not two persons, but one. The heavenly part that stays in heaven, and the part of God that's able to come down and lower itself into the lower realms of earthly weakness and mortality, created the creation. Number 3, God used order. Instead of making everything in one thing, in one moment, he used 7 stages. And this number 7 repeats itself in several very important things, not the least the temple menorah, the temple light stand in the tent of meetings first, and then in the temple later on. Number 4, he placed humankind as last, not as first, in the last stage of the 7 on earth. Important for your view of what's going on, that we are last, we are just the manager after everything else is already in place. We came last and said, oh, that's interesting, then we're surprised about all this. Yes, but we're not the beginning, we were at the end. God is the boss, we're only the manager. If we're doing well, we're only a good manager. Number 5, details are left out. You might say, well, they're not important then. They are very important, but they are left out, and I think on purpose. 1, the presence of gravity. Why not mention the presence of gravity as an interesting situation where astronauts now find out that when you're not on Earth, gravity is not there. It's not a automatic thing in this universe. And we need to be careful with gravity. Sometimes it comes in handy, sometimes it is negative. When you have a priceless piece of art in your hands and you make a mistake and it breaks, falling on the floor, and gravity is not the fault, but you're being not a little bit clumsiness. Also, secondly, the existence of bacteria. You might say, well, is that important? Yes, because in situations of birth and surgery, if we had known in some hundreds of years ago that they existed, if it wasn't the Bible, we could have been warned. But we didn't know until they were found and discovered, and people have died because of the lack of knowledge of these little creatures. The existence of viruses. We have gone through a situation just the last 2 years where the knowledge of viruses would have come in handy and to know about this, but no mentioning of COVID and stuff in the Bible. Then the fact that there are elements like metals like gold and silver and copper, they are there, not mentioned. Later on, people were mining them and are, and there is a purpose that they were not mentioned. God wanted us to know that you need to discover this for yourself. There you are, you're the manager, find out what the shop that you're managing, that you're trying to keep neat and stuff like that. You need to find out all these things, and I will give you the gifts to work with this. The wisdom to be able to make music, the wisdom to make special clothing for priests, the knowledge for building temples. Sometimes there was an architect from a different religion that was used. No mentioning of a yearly calendar. Only in Exodus later on the mentioning of new moon, but no yearly calendar. We had to find out for ourselves. No mentioning of a wheel. The invention of the wheel, the invention of fire, not mentioned there. We were on our own. That is to say, for those who were open to God's intuitive knowledge, they were able to receive it and apply it. Number 6, plants and animals are mentioned in the list of things created, realize that there is no exception with humankind. Also, people are created as group, not as individuals. And I'm going to show this to you in certain verses, and it makes a difference. It looks in a different. You'll give a different view of everything. There is this verse. They come in stages. I will show you this. We start with Genesis 1 verse 24. God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, cattle and creeping things, beasts of the earth according to their kinds," and it was so. What did it say? It says, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures," not God. Yes, that's what it says. And interesting that is that there the creation that God started is able to then take over this creative regeneration and start building things itself. Reason for certain scientists, not only Jewish ones, but also Jewish Orthodox people in scientific institutions who believe in evolution. Oh, bad word for some people. They believe in evolution as a crown on the work of God, because he was able to create creatures that were able to then procreate themselves, adapt themselves to the situations and the conditions on earth, and were able to continue the work that God had started, including evolution, they say. Especially in the text, you can look it up in Genesis chapter 2 verse 3, where it says that God rested after the 7 stages or days. Those words have different meanings, several meanings, not only day. And then the last, in the Hebrew, the end of that sentence, chapter 2 verse 3 in Genesis, the end of the sentence says, for the creation to continue to take on doing this itself. A little bit of a enigmatic statement there at the end of that verse. For some of these scientists, Jewish scientists, to believe in evolution, that the creation takes upon itself to do this, where their respect and awe for God is increased enormously to be able to make products of creation that are able to then continue for itself. Imagine that you would have a car or a bike or whatever that you make, and that starts continuing making cars itself, and then adapt itself to situations in mountains or mud or whatever. That's one of the things that I wanted to show, and there's this each the fact that God creates these things and then builds within each creature the ability to procreate is a very interesting, very impressive situation. The same, no difference with humankind coming as a group. The word in Hebrew for mankind is Adam, A-D-A-M. It doesn't mean the name of a man in the Bible. It means, in the Hebrew, it means humankind. That's how it's translated in certain translations, rightfully so. So who thinks that the word is only a name for one man, Adam and Eve? That's more the story for in certain children's classes. It's not the literal meaning of that word. Each group, whether animals or plants or human people, human beings, has its own flesh, between brackets, between parentheses, basar in Hebrew. And that word means not only meat, but also means relatives, And I'll show that to you also. And it's important to see this because you'll get a different view on this whole thing. So when the men in the Adam group, the human people group, the men are jubilant and they are very enthusiastic when the Eves appear, they say, "This is flesh of my flesh." What do they mean? Do they mean a hump of meat that is taken out of them and then that flesh is taken from them? No, they mean what God says in a translation in a text in Genesis 2 verse 24. I'm going to read it to you. Therefore, it's on the screen also, therefore a man leaves his father and his mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh. Are they becoming one hump of meat? No, they become relatives. That's what that word flesh means. What did the men say when they were so very enthusiastic? It's in Genesis 2 verse 23. And it says, then the man, or the men in plural, said, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. They shall be called, or she shall be called woman, or life bearer," because the word Eve comes from the Hebrew word Chava, where the word Chai is has to do with it, meaning life. Life giver, because that's what women can do. Because she was taken out of the man, not as a clone, but she was from the same basar, from the same group, from the same chromosomes, which word was not known to, not mentioned in the Bible either, as the men were made of. Both men and women are from the same genus of humankind, Homo sapiens, called Adam, Adam. Where does it say that? It says that in Genesis chapter 1 verse 27. So God created humankind, Adam. It's a generic word. So God created mankind in his own image. His meaning the image of humankind. In the image of God, he created him, or better said, mankind. And it says literally male and female. He created them. Here you see in this verse that immediately when Adam is created, it's male and female. Some people say it's a strange creature with man and woman knit together, and God had to separate them or something like that. Middle Age pictures, because it was a difficult text perhaps for them, but it just says that God created the group like he created the group of plants and animals, and of course not one, but in a group. So who is Eve? Eve is not a new creature, not taken from the rib of a man, but in my Bible it says so, yes, in your translation, but not in the Hebrew literally. I'll show you what the word the rib means. Eve is a representative of the genus of Adam. She is the female representative, and as a woman she's able to generally said, she's able to bring life, to give birth to a child. Generally speaking, there are all kinds of situations, variations where that is different, but I'm not talking about that at this moment. Like animals are able to do this also. And she is this representative, and the word Eve simply means a description of her abilities, the ability to bring forth a child, to give birth to a child. So it doesn't say rib. In the Hebrew, the word is tsela. And what's the situation? The situation is this: mankind is busy. They are placed in the Garden of Eden, of Eden, and they're busy because they've given the order to manage this place and to manage the animals and plants in a orderly fashion. No time for social contact. The Lord is watching this and he's concerned, and he brings mankind in a situation called sleep. And you might say, well, that's of course he brings them in some kind of a situation like a surgeon does this. No, it's not that. It's the same sleep kind of a thing as he brought Abraham into in order to start the covenant with him. And Abraham was in this deep sleep, yet he realized that what was going on, he was able to observe this in his sleep, because it was not just sleeping. As you read in the book of Job, I'll read that in a minute, he was in a higher state of consciousness where he was able to see. That's how Moses got to know about this and write about this. And talking about Job, I'll show you where it is. It is in Job 33, verses 15 and 16, and I'll read it to you right now. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men, while they slumber on their beds, then in their vision, in their deep sleep, he opens the ears of men and terrifies them with warnings. This is what Job, or at least the book of Job, it's someone else speaking there, but what it is saying, what does God do during sleep, the sleep of this group called Adam? He is using the tzela, the rib, translated as rib, but we're going to change this. He is using the tzela of the human beings. What is this tzela? Is there examples of this word in the Bible elsewhere? Yes. Look at Ezekiel chapter 41 verse 6 and you'll see a surprising situation coming up. We'll read. The side chambers were in 3 stories, one over another, 30 in each story. There were offsets all around the wall of the temple. This is the temple that Ezekiel was seeing in a elevated state of mind, as supports for the side chambers, so that they should not be supported by the wall of the temple. Technical description that Ezekiel is using. What is he saying? He's talking about the tzela, meaning the side chamber, in the complex of the temple, used for different purposes. That same word is used in the Adam group, where this tzela is taken. In other words, what's going on? Side chambers. Which side chambers? Have you ever asked yourself where the Adams, or even if you believe that there was only one Adam, one Eve, what they were doing while the evening came and the night fell? Where were they? It doesn't say it in the Bible, but the word tzela explains a little bit about it. They were in a building with side chambers. God brings them into sleep, and he's taking not a rib but a side chamber, and this side chamber is going to be destined as a family habitation. This is the literal translation of this text. He gives a new destination to the side chambers of the main building where the Adam group is spending time in the evening and during the night. In Genesis 2 verse 21, it says, so the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the Adam group. And while they slept, God took one of the humankind's main building, and then the side chambers, one of the side chambers, used for storage or whatever, and destined it, made it a closed place for a family. In the traditional translation, it says that he took a piece of meat, took the rib out of the male Adam, and closed the place up with meat again. Now that we know that meat or flesh, also used in the New Testament, means relative, this place becomes a closed place, like this meat was closed, closing the wound, a closed place for meat. For what? For flesh, which is for relatives. It was a room for relatives. In other words, all of a sudden there were couples. Humankind was given the opportunity to socialize in a closed situation where a family came together and children were born and they had their own privacy. One side chamber was enough, yes, like the rest of the creation. Only one was enough, and creation would continue making this and develop this. So this is also what's in the first chapters of Genesis. The one piece of importance. God wants to communicate the importance of being a family. Does that mean that you're being wrong or sinner when you don't have a family and you're living on your own and as a single or something like that? Not at all. Not at all. But you know that family is important. And if you don't have it because of certain life circumstances or a very conscious choice, you still know that family is an important thing and you have your spiritual family in your spiritual group. Immediately after that, it follows that men will leave their parents and start having a relationship with their partner as one flesh, meaning as one family. And then the text continues, and you see what we said as beginning text, that they are naked. They see that they are naked. They are not ashamed of it at all. And what happens is then that there is an important situation that is created of socializing, of being family. The Genesis 1 level was upgraded by this godly intervention. As family, you're strong. The human mortal situation was attended. Now there needs to become attention also for the spiritual side of life. And the spiritual people of Genesis 1 were given, in Genesis 2, you read this, where the dust of the earth was made into a human being. They got their earthly tent. It talks about that in the New Testament. And because the Adam group hadn't been busy with that, they felt naked, which is a healthy response. They felt incomplete, better than we don't need God. They felt naked, and God was giving a response to that too. Naked is a negative concept in the Bible, not because you are without clothes, but because you don't have your covering. Paul talks about it. Job talks about this in chapter 1, verse 21. Job says there, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. It looks like he's returned to the womb in the Hebrew, but that is another point. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But Ezekiel talks about it in a different way. In Ezekiel 16, verse 7, also on the screen. And God says to Israel through the mouth of Ezekiel, God, grow up like a plant of the field. God is saying to Israel, and you grew up, Israel, and you became tall and arrived at full maidenhood. Your breasts were formed and your hair had grown, yet you were naked and not dressed. Read Paul in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 1 through 5. For we know that if the earthly tent we live in, which is the tent we received in Genesis 2, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Here indeed we groan and long to put on our heavenly dwelling, so that by putting it on, we may not be found naked. Same word again. For while we are still in this tent, received in Genesis 2, the first chapter is the spiritual being, the new man that needed to go through its journey on earth in order to receive wisdom and knowledge of God and grow spiritually. The people in Genesis 2 had received their earthly tent and they received mortality. And then had to mortal. We were already in Genesis 1 as well, but with this body we were able to do good things and also make bad choices. Still in this tent we sigh with anxiety, not that we will be unclothed, but that we will be further clothed, so that we so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. He who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. So this is what the Bible wants us to know from the beginning. And then there is the sedation, the seduction, of the serpent in the tree in chapter 3 of Genesis, that shows how much needs to be learned and needs to be cut off and stopped as bad habits and stuff like that. And Messiah is mentioned in chapter 3 of Genesis already. What am I saying? Even in chapter 1, the very first word of the Bible is already mentioning the Messiah. With the first fruit, with Messiah, God created the heavens and the earth. Through him and by him all things were created, Paul says in chapter 15 of the Corinthians. So Messiah is coming back already in chapter 3 of this Genesis book. So interesting that God is creating this whole picture. Let's read Genesis 3:15. I will put enmity between you, serpent, and the woman, or the women, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, you shall bruise his heel. It's interesting that even the detail of the heel in the Roman torture nail is already mentioned there in chapter 3 verse 15. Also the pain that belongs to giving birth to children is mentioned there, and the misery that is also described of this dysfunctional family of Adam and Eve and their two sons, Cain and Abel. A family of a father and a mother and two sons, and they quarrel. Quarreling is one thing, but one brother killing the other one is something for child protection services, and they had to be found out, they had to be invented at that moment. They were not there yet. So this is what we're reading, and then there is the texts in the Haftarah, the text of Isaiah chapter 42. I'm not reading it, but only it's coming on the screen, and you'll see that there that God says, the one who created the heavens and stretched them out, repeating what's said in Genesis. I'm the Lord your God, I've called you in righteousness, verse 6. To open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners, verse 7. I'm the Lord, verse 8. I'm the Lord, that is my name, my glory I give to no other, nor my praise to graven images. Behold, the former things have come to pass. New things I now declare. Nice words, but human beings are the bearers of God's image, and that we have the role to be a light for the people. To open blind eyes, to free prisoners from jail. I'm not talking about detention centers, but the spiritual jails that people live in. Do we have enough knowledge to be able to do this? Do we have enough example behavior in ourselves? What was the purpose to see Adam and Eve in a different light? To get rid of the Sunday school stories. They're beautiful, they're nice, they're important for children, but we need to come to the origin of the texts in the Bible. And it there will be more responsibility when you read the texts, and the group of men and women. It's less spooky to have this one couple that has so much challenge and so much misery and so much difficulty. It is a group like the group of animals and the group of plants, each one in its own order. And we have our responsibility. We're part of a big system. We're not just a special group. We come on the stage when everything else is already there. We came in last, and we need to know our place. In the Berit Chadashah, final text today is in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9 through 17. Where this very, very interesting text of Yeshua is put down, and it says that he is a little bit lower than the angels, temporarily. If you look at this text, you see that he is crowned with glory and honor, and he had to go through this In chapter 13 it says, "Here I am, the children God has given me." This text is saying what the importance is of Messiah, already mentioned in Genesis. Very important that God comes on earth, staying in heaven as the heavenly light, and yet at the same time manifesting part of himself as a mortal human being on earth, in order to give us the opportunity to be heavenly creatures, mortal as we are, and stay and continue to be. We need the energy and the life support from the tree of life forever. We'll never be on our own. We'll never have life of ourselves. But we are enabled to do this by the presence, the sacrifice, the death, and the resurrection of Messiah. And this text in Hebrews is, I think, inspired by Psalms 8, verse 5, where it says, last final text today, "Yet you have made him little less than God, and have crowned him with glory and honor." But it's temporarily. It's really, really God. God and Yeshua are one. It's one. God is able to separate the oneness without losing the oneness, comes to earth and does this and then goes back again. So Yeshua is with us for a short time, and his godliness has been taken away from him temporarily. Did he have it? Yes, he had it. He temporarily gives it up, takes upon himself our manifestation, our form, flesh and blood. There's the word flesh again. But he's God's image. We are created according to his image. On earth, he takes that same image upon himself and goes in front of us through death and through resurrection as the first fruit, the word that is mentioned as the first word in the Bible. We need to make sure that we throw away our old nature, and at the moment that we start having our new nature, recognize the Genesis 1 person in ourselves that once was innocent and didn't know anything, and the earth, and also we were tohu vavohu, we were void and without any form or shape or development. But now we are finding ourselves as a spiritual being with the down payment of God's Spirit in ourselves, the powers of the world to come within ourselves. At the moment that we have our new nature and we start to put it on as our new clothing, our new dress, instead of being naked, at that moment his image, the image of God on earth, is fulfilled in us, and we are still, and then at that moment we are really like God's image. This is how the Bible starts. This is what it's all about. We are dead in a sense, because we need to die on our old selves. Here on earth, beneath the sun, there's nothing to be found. God is working. He never rests. He still works, as Yeshua is also saying, but because he rested on this, it's after the sixth day, after the sixth stage, we also rest on the day of Shabbat. It's a beautiful parallel there. Connect with your Creator. Realize that with all the technical and complicated explanation of the Bible, and leaving some old traditional interpretations and translations and exchange them for new ones, it might be important, and I think it is, but purpose is to have a real tight relationship with your Father in heaven. It's actively involved to bring us to himself. He's demanding that love doesn't come from only one side, only his, but from two sides, also from us, from ourselves. And God offers light, comfort, covering, protection for those who love Him. And we need to look more and more like His image, that we are created according to that image. If you do that, then the balance between understanding of the Bible and working on your relationship with your Father in heaven will be a very good and very stable one, a very beautiful one. The knowledge, and yet at the same time your experience, you're being loved, feeling loved, and spreading that, sharing that with family, both physically but definitely spiritually, is then your next thing to do. With all this, we have a lot to do. Shabbat Shalom.